state, such as ongoing antisocial behaviour issues or pressures on local services, even if they are new and have not contributed to the existing issues. This approach ensures applicants don't unintentionally add to existing issues and enables the licensing authority to address applications that fail to adequately consider the cumulative impact. The authority is therefore better equipped to protect residents, manage the nighttime economy, and uphold the licensing objectives in areas of high levels of crime and antisocial behaviour. Analysis of the cumulative impact data found on page 22 and paragraphs 15 to 19 demonstrates there has been no significant decrease in relevant crime in the city centre and East Oxford areas, and that all offence statistics in these areas are above the Oxfordshire rate. The police data is then correlated, hospital data and CCTV to demonstrate a link within the nighttime economy. This data and its correlation to areas of high density licensed premises is the evidential base for the recommended SSP areas. Responses from the public consultation held earlier in the year are found at Appendix 2, pages 43 to 53, and is summarised on pages 21 and 22, paragraphs 7 to 14. It shows both the fire service and the police strongly agreeing to maintaining an SSP in the city centre and East Oxford, and members of the public raising concerns that Oxford lacks a thriving nighttime economy, or that continuing the policy will result in widespread business closures. The licensing statistics demonstrate that the SSP does not negatively impact the district and shows a regular flow of applications. During the previous policy period, 120 new premises licence or variation applications were received. 52 of those were located within the 2 SSP areas. 8 of those applications were referred to a subcommittee, with 3 receiving objections from the police citing the SSP. 1 application, which was a variation, was refused, and the 51 others were granted with existing or additional conditions. This committee has a statutory duty to promote the 4 licensing objectives. These are the legal foundation of all licensing decisions, and as such, the duty to prevent nuisance and crime and disorder must be the foremost consideration today. The authority has a duty to prevent public nuisance and crime and disorder arising from the high concentration of premises in an area. Therefore, significant weight is given to the views of responsible authorities. In particular, the police, who are the lead agency for the prevention of crime and disorder matters under the Licensing Act. In Oxford, the SSP helps to ensure licences are granted with reasonable and robust conditions designed to uphold the licensing objectives. All applications within SSP areas between 2022 and 2025 were subject to such conditions, usually proposed by the applicant following consultation with responsible authorities. Without an SSP, the Council's ability to uphold the licensing objectives is reduced, and there is greater reliance on reacting to problems once they've occurred, as opposed to preventing them in the first place. The authority has proposed a cumulative impact assessment for 25 to 28, considering all evidence gathered. The assessment sets out that the authority is of the opinion that the number of licensed premises and club premises certificates within the city centre and East Oxford area is such that it is likely that granting further licences or variations to licences would be inconsistent with the authority's duty to promote the licensing objectives. Although this statement is a statutory requirement, it does not mean that all new and varied applications will be refused. Rather, it ensures that all applicants will be expected to demonstrate robust measures to uphold the licensing objectives in these areas, and all applications are considered on their own merits. The proposed CIA 2025 to 2028 can be found at Appendix 4, pages 59 to 72. The committee is requested to recommend to full council adoption of the CIA 25 to 28, which adopts the SSP covering the city centre and East Oxford areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. Do we have any questions for Katie at this stage before we open up debate? Councillor Upton, please.
So when you say at this stage, is there going to be another stage?
We're going to, then there is an opportunity, I guess, if we have clarifications that emerge during the debate, that we can ask her questions at that stage. But I think just if there is any clarification that anyone has at this stage, then yes, please. Yeah. Oh, okay. I'll deal with these first. Yeah.
Okay, so no, this isn't a clarification. This is a question I'm going to ask during the debate, I guess.
Fine. Any further clarification from the report from officers? Okay, we'll come to yourself and then we'll come over here, so please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify those numbers again about how many applications have been refused within the SSP in the previous licensing. Can you just clarify those numbers again?
Yep, so 120 new premises license or variation applications were received. 52 were located within the SSP areas. 8 were referred to subcommittee, resulting in 1 application, which was a variation being refused. So 51 of those 52 applications within the SSP were granted.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Altino, I think you had a question for Katie.
Yeah, so we haven't had this policy for the last 5 months. Do you have any sort of data or information about what has changed or hasn't changed in that last 5 months as opposed to perhaps the 5 months before? Have there been more applications? Have the applications been different in any way? Has the response from the police to those applications been different? Obviously, they can't just object to them. Have there been more refusals? Any sort of information about what might have happened differently in that last 5 months to the previous 5 months?
May I check?
Licensing, Joshua.
Thank you. There was 1 application that had been received prior to the committee last time. So the application had a large amount of conditions proposed on it already, but when it came to the decision-making time, the policy wasn't in place. That license was granted as applied for with some amendments to the conditions. But the police at that committee essentially said our grounds in regards to the SSP are essentially withdrawn or have much less weight applied to them due to the lack of an SSP. And that license was granted. And there's not been any applications objected to on grounds of SSP or cumulative impact since then. So there's not been any applications since the policy wasn't in place that fit the same criteria that would have been within the SSP. I think that's right. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Question from Councillor Rahman, please, to the officers.
Chair. So you've only had 1 application that would have been impacted by the SSP in the 4.5 months or so that we've had.
None, actually. There was the 1 that was received,
okay,
was received before.
So are you saying the conditions were lighter or had to be a little bit easier than if we had the SSP in place? And if that's the case, are you concerned about them if the SSP was in place? Would the licenses still be granted under the conditions that they have now?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. So there have been no applications within the SSP since the SSP was removed.
You said you had 1 application.
1 application beforehand.
Before, but then that was...
So that was granted as applied for. What my assessment of that would be is actually that license is probably the most robust license I have ever seen granted in the city. It has more conditions than pages are usually found on a license. And I would say that is down to the fact that there was an SSP in place at the time they applied. And so they essentially proposed all of the conditions suggested by the police and added more of their own on top of that. So actually what they were proposing in their own application was already significantly more restrictive or more upholding of the licensing objectives than an application would have been if there was no SSP. I would not expect an application to look like that at all. I would expect many less conditions proposed, essentially. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Up to a point. Without the SSP in place, they would have known they could have taken some conditions away if they wanted to, but they were quite happy to keep them. and the conditions that they set upon themselves, without the SSP, would you be able to suggest them in any case?
Yes, and so any application is determined on its own merits. Any application can receive objections from a responsible authority or member of the public. And if there is an objection, then it will come to a hearing, and at a hearing, conditions can either be proposed by responsible authorities, objectors, the applicant, or committee members, and it's then the committee members that would then impose those on the license. So those conditions theoretically could have still been placed on that license. I think it would be incredibly unlikely to see a license approved with such a list of conditions if there was no SSP in place. Because there's no, they don't have to defend the cumulative area. They don't have to defend the impact of the crime in that local area. They just have to look at their own application.
Yeah, Councillor Roman, if you want to.
But we could still impose those conditions, right? So just because they don't think they have to be really restrictive, the committee officers and other bodies, they could impose the conditions anyway.
Yes and no. You can propose conditions. Those conditions have to be reasonable. Those conditions have to be lawful and enforceable. And without an SSP, you can't impose conditions that don't necessarily apply to that application, because an application is based on its own merits. And without an SSP, an applicant does not have to prevent or put preventive measures in place for its local area, as you must do or are expected to when there is an SSP in place. So you have more weight as a councillor to apply conditions to a license when there's an SSP in place, if you're trying to protect the local area, the crime and disorder, prevention of nuisance. Without an SSP, you have to be looking much more at the license and what they might be contributing, and not looking at incidents or occurrences from neighbouring premises or areas.
Councillor Upton, please, a question to officers.
Thank you. So one of the possible objections to having an SSP is that it's sort of preventing people coming forward with applications, and that might be damaging our nightlife. But so I'm clear, actually, with the SSP in place, we had 52 applications, 51 of which were approved anyway. But since we've dropped it, we've not suddenly seen a flood of applications for people thinking, oh, great, now we don't have an SSP to go in. So that there's not really an argument that, yes, what do you think having an SSP has prevented people putting applications? Have you had that feedback?
The number of applications we receive year on year, month by month, has remained exactly the same on average. Since 2018, really, the number of applications per year has stayed within a number of 10 of each other. I think the highest number we had was 55. The lowest number we had was 33 over the last, since 2018, each year. So it kind of stays, we have not seen an impact of more applications at the moment.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then the
Councillor
other
Upton.
bit is that, so if we got rid of the SSP, the downside would be we wouldn't get such good engagement from people beforehand, because they wouldn't feel they had to, perhaps. And at the moment, it seems like you are getting very good engagement from people, and they are willing to put in place things that are going to make it more acceptable to us as a licensing authority. And most particularly then, I'm just checking I understand correctly what you said. Without an SSP, we couldn't, so if someone comes along and say they want to open a bar on the high street, we just have to apply exactly the same criteria as if they said, I want to open a bar somewhere where there's hardly anything going on. And yeah, okay. And actually, we do think that if there are 30 other bars already on that street, then we do need to look at it differently if there's somebody proposing to add another one to that spot. Sorry, that's got a bit rambling, but.
No, your point's correct.
It's not quite as black and white as that. every application is deemed on its own merits. If that application is for a nightclub on a busy nightclub street, it will be considered more stringent, more closely than a cafe on a corner that's looking for daytime hours. What's reasonable for those two premises will be different. So what you're proposing to condition and uphold the objectives will obviously vary. I guess the main difference is if the police were to object when there is no SSP, talking about the crime and disorder in an area, we would expect as part of their objection, they provide that data. They would have to do the data dig, provide it and say, this is why in that area, this is an issue. When there is an SSP in place, that bit of data and work has already been done. It's accepted that this is an area of high crime. Therefore, the objection can rely on that evidence, which is more than just the police data. It's the hospital data, it's the CCTV, it's national statistics, it's the correlation of them all into the nighttime economy, which the police wouldn't realistically do on their own objection, but when there is an SSP in place, could rely on that evidence for their objection.
Thank you. So just to clarify, it's saving police time. It relies on a larger data set and enables sort of stronger conditions to be placed than if you didn't have the SSP. Is that correct? Just to summarise.
I think that's a fair summary.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple more hands. I didn't see which order, so I better not sure it was Councillor Jupp, yeah, please, and then Councillor Ottino. In turn, question to the officers, please.
Thank you. The report states, and Josh Cohn has just repeated that there's been no disruption or no difference in the flow of applications to the authority since the SSP was introduced. What I'd like to know is whether there's been a change in the type of business or prospective business applying, or perhaps in the nature of the capital available to those businesses as compared to either before the SSP was introduced or in other parts of the city that don't fall under the SSP regime?
It's an incredibly difficult question to answer because we simply don't have a means of gathering that evidence. An application for a license doesn't have to say the type, what they're going to do necessarily, particularly if there's no SSP and it doesn't need to be full with raft of conditions. Also, once a license is granted, that license may be transferred, and how they use that license may be completely different. What was a cafe that played music late at night may then become a dance floor that plays music late at night. That type is not something that's categorized differently under the Licensing Act. It's just the licensable activities, whether the sale of alcohol, late night refreshment, or regulated entertainment. As for a change in the type of people applying in terms of the capital they have available, again, you can apply as an individual, you can apply as a business. We would not look at an applicant as an individual or a business as any different when we are considering an application. It's not relevant to the licensing objectives, which is our core function. The type of premises they're holding, the type of company that wants to open something simply isn't relevant to the protection of the public and the purpose of licensing. So unfortunately, no, I can't answer those questions.
Thank you. Councillor Ottino, please.
I mean, this isn't a question, this is a point. So do you want just questions first?
I think we've had a very thorough explanation, I think, from officers. Bearing in mind we've got a very packed agenda today, I suggest that we do open the debate if that's okay, because we do also, as you can see, we've got an audience for the next agenda as well. So we've got a lot to get through, but we do need to discuss this properly. So if we are now moving towards being ready for debate, just to remind ourselves, because there's a procedure to all of this. So just remind, we're here to uphold the licensing objectives, which you're aware of, which we reminded ourselves. And we've got 3 points in our recommendation pack that we've got to consider. One is we've got to sort of note the cumulative impact assessment for this year. It's an evidence basis. It's more of a note, but we can discuss that first. Then the second point is, with that in mind, we have to make a recommendation or not around this to control the cumulative impact by retaining or not retaining the special saturation policy. So that is then the next item that we'll be discussing. And then we have to put this to full council as a recommendation. Full council ultimately will be the decision maker here, but we have to put a recommendation to them. So just in terms of procedure. The other thing is if we do get to a stage after our debate where we're not accepting an amendment or a recommendation, we learnt from last time, and the reason why we were conferring beforehand is just the procedure around this, just to clarify. We can't revert back to a previous recommendation because that was something that we had a big discussion about last time. So just so that you're clear on that process. So we're going to open up for the debate, and yeah, James.
Just to clarify on procedure, if we don't recommend the policy, it doesn't go to full council and it just ends here, right?
No, just to clarify.
just clarify.
Yeah. So what has to happen? A recommendation has to go to full council. The recommendation is either the supporting of it, and we recommend that the council, and I can even say the kind of there's a wording within here which we either agree it or we recommend to council that they don't agree it. We have to say the opposite to them. We recommend they agree with the special saturation policy, or we recommend to them that they don't agree to adopt it. Something has to be recommended to council, and we can't leave the room this evening and get on to the next policy until we have that recommendation agreed, the positive or the negative version of that recommendation. So I hope that's clear in terms of procedure. So yeah. Okay, yeah. So just under 14 and 11B of the Constitution, if there is a tied vote, although I don't think we have that situation.
We're 11 now.
We're 11 now. So unless Mohammed, Councillor Aziz arrives, if he does, and there's a tied vote, the chair does get the deciding vote there. But I don't think we're in that situation unless he arrives. So just so you're clear on that. To debate. So you've heard the information. We've got 2 points over here. Councillor Otieno first, and then we'll turn over to Ames. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, starting with the evidence. I see the evidence. I see, for instance, the report by the Fire Service. I can't argue with it, but I just don't see how it infers that we should have a saturation policy. I see the evidence from the police. Again, I can't argue with what they're saying. It seems to sort of infer that we should have a saturation policy because it puts pressure on their resources. And obviously they choose how they put their resources around, and probably nobody in this room voted for the Thames Valley Police Commissioner. And we probably would all prefer he put a lot more resources to the city in lots of areas, including here. So I don't want us to be sort of forced in a position by him. And then just like 15 on page 22, the crime data presented illustrates there's been no significant decrease in relevant crime in Oxford's top 4 LSOAs since the previous SSP was adopted. I'm sort of assuming that there would have been a decrease. So I'm not really sure what to make for that. But I suppose my main observation is I think I've been on subcommittees where I think we've had 6 cases since we didn't have the SSP, 3 in the city centre and 3 on the county road of one form or other. We didn't allow all of them to have a licence. I think we took a licence away from one of them, or didn't get, I can't remember exactly. I think the point about the point has been made that the SSP forces the applicants to engage more in the process. My observation is actually that not having the SSP forces the police to engage more in the process. So I'm thinking back to the 3 applications for the city centre, where the police proposed a hell of a lot of conditions. And when it got to the committee, the applicant, I think, pretty much said, yeah, we'll agree to all those conditions. and possibly we even added a few more that they were happy to agree to. So I think with the SSP, you get a bit of laziness from the police in terms of we just object to this. I think applicants find it difficult to find evidence how they can easily find evidence how they can manage their business, their premises, but they find it difficult to provide evidence how they can affect the wider area. And I think probably we will find a lot of applicants are put off by that. And that's not a good thing, because we do want our nighttime economy to be thriving. But with the police therefore saying, actually, here, and there was one literally about 30 conditions, wasn't there? There was, there's no way the applicant would have come up with those on their own. They came from the police. So I think it actually forces the police to work a bit harder. And I think that's actually produced, in those cases that I was on, produced better outcomes and very little opposition from the applicants who are, wanting to get this license and don't, they don't want to cause problems, and and they're willing to work. And I think it's reading the proposed policy where it says, the standard position is to reject, basically. That's what it comes across as. If you can't prove that you're not going to add impact to the area, it puts people off. I mean, I still also have objections with the areas that are proposed. I noticed the Cowley Road one, for instance, doesn't include Rectory Road or Crown Street. So you've got pubs in those areas who will, exactly the same. All those clients will be going down the Cowley Road.
Can you move to sum up, please, so we can get through everyone? We've got a lot to get through.
Yeah, so I feel there's a disadvantage, and I still think the city centre, again, it doesn't include the Westgate area. It doesn't include the West End. It would be unfair. And I suppose, lastly, like every other town and city centre in the country, there is a crisis in city centres because people are moving to shopping online. Shops are disappearing. There's a danger, and we hear this all the time from our residents, that what's the point of going to a city centre? There's nothing there apart from Harry Potter shops. There's a danger that our city centre and other city centres are going to disappear. And the alternative is entertainment, I think. And I think the danger is that if we will just have empty buildings.
Thank you. Councillor Otieno, thank you for your points, of which there are multiple. What I would just remind you is just to say that the licensing objectives are the prevention of crime and disorder, the promotion of public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. So whilst the point is taken about the nighttime economy and regeneration of public spaces and city centres, that's a different policy area that is out of scope of the decision making of this committee. The statutory objectives of this committee are those 4 licensing objectives, but your points are all well taken. Councillor Taylor.
Can I just get a clarification as to whether or not that's true? Because I think we can only consider the licensing objectives in subcommittees, and when it comes to policy, we can consider any kind of argument that is best for the city.
Would you like me to come in and No, it's the duty of this committee to consider the licensing objectives. That is the duty of the committee. That's what you're considering here.
So we're not allowed to make the argument that
you can make the argument if whatever you can debate as you wish, but the duty of the committee is to promote the.
Oh, so we can debate as we wish. Yeah, we can bring in any sort of policy area into the policy discussion.
But when you're voting, you should be acting upon the fact that you're a member of this committee, and the duty of this committee is to consider the 4 licensing objectives.
Okay,
You would not be following your duty I would respectfully submit, if you voted if you're believing that you're promoting the nighttime economy and not paying due regard and due attention to the 4 objectives.
Okay, then I'm going to make, as part of the debate, my thing's mostly going to be centred around the nighttime economy. Although I am going to start something that.
Can we just clarify that I guess the point that we've just heard from our solicitor, who's our legal advisor as a committee, is we can talk about that, but it is not within scope of this committee to make policy decisions related to that area. Our statutory committee role and function is related to the 4 licensing objectives which are set out before you. And whilst with all due respect, we can debate that, but it is given that we're the scope of and remit of this committee is these licensing objectives. Just bear that in mind with your intervention, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Allusions have been made multiple times to a specific case that came forward to the subcommittee, a case of a license that was put forward. The application was made while the SSP was in place, but when we actually considered the license, the SSP was no longer had expired. Me, Simon, and Theo were the three people who sat on that subcommittee. It was for something called the Underground Bar. As was said here, was one of the most robust applications that had been seen. The police were incredibly commending. Everyone said it was the best application they've probably ever seen. I don't think that was because of the SSP. The police also went out of their way to commend the person who'd put in the application and said that while she had held previous licenses, she was incredibly engaged and went out of her way to engage with the police and local groups and things like that. So I don't think it was because of the SSP. But more importantly, even though it was an incredibly robust application, and even though she'd done everything she possibly could, the police still put in an objection on the basis of the SSP. Now, obviously the SSP had expired, so we disregarded it, and the police basically had nothing to say. But in every subsequent application where the SSP had not been in place, the police put in a series of considerably more thoughtful objections that greatly enhanced the actual license and placed additional conditions that actually massively benefited the area instead of just flat out objecting. And I think that's actually more beneficial. So on top of my argument of the nighttime economy, where I don't think we should be able to just refuse a license on the basis of it being in the city centre or on the basis of it being on the Cali Road, this is actually increasing, massively increased our ability to meet our licensing objectives because the police have put in more thoughtful objections and have worked with the applicants significantly more rather than just placing in incredibly lazy objections. Even though they've been some of the best applications we've ever seen.
Thank you, James. So I think one of the points that I think the officers made earlier was that the police when there is the SSP, they don't, because all of these other conditions sort of stem from that, and that's a wider reference point, then they don't need to provide all of that extra response, was my understanding. But I think we've got two points that I've seen raised.
Can I just wrap up just real quick? The last thing I was going to say is that despite the SSP not being in place for that meeting, we propose additional additions to the license, including additional security for that nightclub. If the argument is that we can't propose additional conditions like that, because the SSP allows us to give more credence to conditions like that. Well, the nightclub actually accepted those conditions, even though apparently they didn't need to, and were actually that they worked with us in making sure those conditions worked for them. So I think actually the SSP has been a negative and has actually harmed our ability to meet our licensing objectives on top of harming the nighttime economy, and I think it should just be repealed. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, we have, I think, two further speakers. We've got Councillor Mudderman, we've got Councillor Rayman. If there's anyone else due to catch my eye, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make a few points. One is I just listening to Councillor Attino, who referred to some applications that he'd sat on since the SSP. Didn't make sense to me because you said you'd been on some that had been applications within the SSP, and I think our officer said that there'd only been one application, and the two things didn't add up, so I didn't understand whether you had been on.
So there were definitely 6. I don't know, they weren't necessarily all new applications. There might have been extensions and
right.
Adding alcohol to a restaurant, I think. I can't remember the exact details, but there were 6 cases either on Cowley Road or city centre.
Right, okay.
Just quickly for Councillor Mudderman's benefit, for me personally, there have been at least 2 applications where I've sat on the committee, and either the applicant or the relevant authorities or both have proceeded on the basis that the SSP is still in place, even when that hasn't been the case. So that I suspect that may have influenced what Councillor Attino was saying.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you for the clarification. Okay, councillor Mudderman, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd just like to repeat what the officer said, which is that we've had 52 applications in the last licensing period in the SSP, so in the special saturated area, and only one has been refused. So, I mean, that's a tiny, tiny fragment. One has been refused. So I think it's hard to argue that that having the SSP in place is stopping applications from going ahead, because it's such a tiny number that has been refused because of the SSP. It's just one. And secondly, I'd like to say that the SSP is a tool that we can use. It's there. If we have it, we can use it when there is an application that we are not happy with. If it's not there, we don't have the tool. So if we take it away, we take that option away, and there might be a really bad application that we don't want to, and we can use the SSP if we have it, but we don't have to, you know, we don't. So I would argue that I'd rather keep it and use it when we need to, rather than not have it. I think, and finally, on the idea that that it's easier for the police if there is no SSP, sorry, yeah. Then I think when the police object, they have to, I think I'm right in saying they have to provide evidence. I think somebody said in their argument that if that the police could just object and it made them lazy. But actually, I think if they object, they have to give evidence as to why they're objecting. So maybe,
Yeah, maybe we can. Can I? Joshua, if you could just clarify this distinction. So, if we have the SSP and the police put in a objection, they can refer to the cumulative impact assessment as the evidence. So they don't have to justify. The CIA is the evidence base that they put forward, because it is accepted as evidence that there is high crime in those two areas. And so they do not need to go into extensive detail, is that right? Whereas if we don't have that, they can't refer to the evidence in the wider area. They only have to refer to the evidence that relates to the venue where the licence applicant is applying from. Could you just clarify that point in the distinction? Because I think it was important that you raised that.
The police can object on grounds of the licensing objectives if they feel as though they're not going to be upheld with the application in front of them. The breadth of those objections, when there's an SSP in place, presumably are wider, are broader. They can take in more evidence that exists that they can rely upon. If every application included all of the data that was provided for a cumulative impact assessment, then in essence, if they could submit all that evidence for every application and it be considered in a similar way, but there is no expectation that an applicant for a new license or a variation, no expectation that they should be putting in mitigations to manage the fact that they're applying for a license in an area of concentrated premises that is a high level of crime, disorder, or public nuisance. It's very difficult to say whether the objections will be greater or not, or evidenced or not, because each case is based on its own merits. Each objection will be very different and for its own reasons. Whether that's what you've experienced yourself seeing these objections or not, I can't speak to. The only comment I would make is I would say I cannot think of any license application for a new premises in the city that the police have not engaged as early as possible. Saying that the police aren't working hard in the licensing, I would disagree with. Every single application, we know from the joint work we do that they are engaging early, and that may still end in an objection, but doesn't always.
We just finished. So we've got Councillor Emin has been, we've got Councillor Jupp, and we've got others to get round. Sorry, we're very short of time tonight. Councillor Emin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So at our previous meeting, I was quite apprehensive about the SSP. I still have my concerns. I actually think that the city centre and Calderwood should be two different SSPs, or to have different kind of impact assessments and should be treated differently. But considering that our first duty is towards the public, I think that we should have an SSP, especially for the Cowley Road, on the basis that neighbours, people, residents, they sometimes don't apply or don't make objections, so we kind of do the job for them, where authorities, police, I mean, I know, I take your point, Simon, that police can be lazy, but if the police are lazy, surely we have a duty to make sure that we have something in place so that our public, our residents are protected if some authority is lazy. But my main concern is that, you know, residents, they don't really engage with the process of licensing and everything as much as the police would or the fire brigade would. So I think reluctantly, because I think Cowley Road and City Centre should have a separate one, but where that's not possible, because that's what we had last time, that's not possible to have, I think that it's important that we have an SSP. So it's incumbent. I think the biggest difference is the proof or the burden of proof is shifted from the authority to the applicant. If it's not, it's going to be the other way around if we don't have the SSP. So there's not something that they can work to. If we have that SSP in place, then they've got something to work to as well, not come here and hopefully find 3 councillors or subcommittee acting differently to another set of subcommittee, which could then make it difficult for our applicants, so they can't understand what they need to do, because myself, Simon and Jupp might have one decision and Edward and a couple other guys would have a different decision, and another application will get confusing. So I think our main licensing objective to me is to protect the public, and in that basis, I think it's much safer to have an SSP. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, thank you. I know we've got Councillor Jupp and we've got Councillor Mundy. I would like to, just because a couple of the points that you've raised, also make an intervention as well. So I'll just make that and then come round. But my intervention here is that just in terms of vulnerable residents, I think this is a really important point. Taking my chair's hat off and putting my contributor's hat on here, we also have to think about the people who are using the area, and particularly when we think that there's high crime and disorder in an area, and we've got to look at vulnerable women, particularly in that area. The vulnerability point works both ways, from the users of these geographies that we're focusing on, and also from the point of view of the residents. And you're right, some of the most vulnerable residents in the city are located in and around some of these areas of high crime and disorder. So thank you for putting that point forward. Councillor Jupp, and then we've got Councillor Mundy as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to react to a few of the points that have been raised by other speakers. First of all, I don't understand why we are all assuming that having an SSP in place for the Cowley Road and the High Street will automatically result in the licensing objectives being served better, when there isn't any evidence to show that that's been the case. Crime hasn't decreased over the time that the SSP has been in place. And nor is there evidence, incidentally, to make the opposite argument that if we got rid of, or rather if we didn't renew the SSP, then all hell would break loose on the Cowley Road or in the High Street, in the central area. Secondly, Councillor Muddiman mentioned having bad applications and not being able to do anything because of the presumption that a licence should be granted under the normal regime. If a licence is bad or that bad, then there's any number of reasons why we can't grant it. If we're not convinced, and this is an argument that I've made multiple times in subcommittee myself, if I'm not convinced that an applicant is properly engaging with the licensing objectives, then I've made my view very clear multiple times, including to people who are probably taking the opposite stance to me today, that the license shouldn't be granted. And I don't think, SSP or no SSP, that still applies. Furthermore, we don't get to choose whether to use or not to use the SSP, which is something that I thought you were hinting at. The SSP imposes a rebuttable presumption that we will not grant the license unless we're convinced that the applicant's business wouldn't have a net negative area on negative impact, sorry, on the cumulative levels of crime and so on in the surrounding area. But it's not something that we get to choose whether or not to implement. We can't say, oh yeah, because there's an SSP in place, then we're going to put all of these extra conditions on. And finally, on the matter of police objections, I wouldn't call the police lazy myself, but I have noticed over the course of having sat on several, in fact, very many to my mind, licensing and gambling act subcommittees, that the police objections contain very great similarities from application to application, and there have been applications where the police objection, where the license-specific element of the police objection has amounted maybe to one line or one sentence. Again, that's not to suggest that the police are lazy, but I definitely agree with the argument that having the SSP in place could well result in the police worsening that trend or certainly continuing to act in that way, when actually not having the SSP in place means that we can guarantee that someone from the police will turn up and be able to be interrogated and you know, asked for perhaps a more detailed view than the one that's apparent from reading what they've submitted in writing.
Okay, thank you. I think there was a point there that perhaps does the licensing officer want to come back on around any of the points that were raised here around the number of applicants, so the volume of the volume of crime. So we know that there's the evidence base, which is in the CIA, and have we now got more licensed premises than before? The aggregate number, is that more than it was compared to in the past? Just to clarify that point, because I think it was something that was raised by Councillor Jupp around whether the amount of crime has decreased or increased over time, and it's stayed the same relatively, but has the overall number of licenses increased, I guess, is the clarification.
So the number of licenses within both SSP areas have largely stayed the same. When licenses go away, often new applications come in, or more often than not, there's transfers and so forth. As for crime going up or going down or staying the same, the purpose of the SSP is not to reduce crime statistics in an area, but to prevent an applicant adding to an area that is known to have a high level of crime. So crime statistics may go up or stay the same, whether there's an SSP in place or not. But what we would hope is any licenses that are granted in one of those areas of high crime, that they have measures in place to mitigate against potential impact they could add to or increase or cause a problem for. So it's not that the SSP is designed to reduce crime. I would hope that is the role of the police to manage. The role of the SSP and the committee is to uphold the objectives and have mitigations in place in those areas.
Thank you for the clarification. I think we've got Councillor Mundy and then Councillor Rehman. We are limited by time this evening, so just I think as time starts moving on, just to bear that in mind, please. So we're going to have to start moving towards decision making in a moment. So thank you, Councillor Mundy.
All right, thank you. I'll just make one submission there. So yeah, I agree with a lot of what Councillor Rehman was saying, really, because yeah, I too was, you know, not always seeing that there was a lack of pressure on licensees and people having businesses in the nighttime economy. But ultimately, you know, I'm very concerned about throwing out the SSP, and I would personally not vote to do so. So Joshua was just talking about crime statistics. It's interesting that people talk about crime statistics. I really don't think we would seek to analyse crime statistics in this meeting. Certainly not crime statistics from the last 4 months. I can't see how that would be statistically relevant, even if we could seek to do so here. As already been mentioned, there's SSP is not there to prevent licensed premises or to prevent changes to licensed premises. It's obviously there for the licensing objectives. There's been the implication seems to be from some members that a vibrant nighttime economy is going to it sort of involves violence and crime, basically, and that actually in some sense that's something we should accept and the police should commit more resources to, because what the SSP should be doing, and actually we can support it to do this as councillors in this committee, is to support a nighttime economy that actually doesn't contribute to increases in crime and disorder. So I think that's very important. I think it's really important to remember the impact of crime. It's really important to remember the impact of violence and sexual crimes, which we've seen referenced in the report. These particularly impact vulnerable people. They can impact children and women, and they are statistically more prevalent and historically more prevalent in these areas that we're talking about, the city centre and on Cowley Road. And I think it's really, really important to remember the impact of those crimes. We're not just talking about sort of inconvenient crimes or a smashed window, which are also can be extremely troubling, but we are talking about life-changing incidents and a policy that should be seeking to ensure that the nighttime economy is not contributing to increases in those incidents. People have talked about police resources, and I'm all for a bit of bashing of the police, but I don't think there's a great deal of benefit in talking about how the police should just bring all the cops in from the suburbs and bring them into the city centre on Friday and Saturday night to support the nighttime economy, because there's no trouble in Barton and there's no trouble in Blackbird Leys or anywhere else. The police have got a duty to look after people across the city. They're not just there to police the activities of people who are enjoying the nighttime economy. And part of the SSP is ensuring that premises that are licensed are actually are doing things and they're operating in such a way to ensure that they are trying to prevent these kind of incidents taking place. That's all I've got to say about it. So yeah, I very much urge people to vote for the SSP that supports the nighttime economy. Thank you.
Thank you. And just, I guess a reminder, these are particularly the Cowley Road area is a residential area, particularly, and there are residents that live in the centre as well. We have 2 points here. We've got Councillor Lygo and Councillor Roman. Can Councillor Lygo, please? He hasn't spoken yet.
Thank you. I've taken time to listen to both sides of this. I've been on licensing now, I think 16 out of 17 years. I've been a city councillor as well. I guess if we were to reject the SSP, and I'm saying would there be scope for a review, for example, of 12 months of monitoring, looking at evidence about applications going in and any other issues around it?
Thank you for that. I think the question around the evidence base, the evidence is here in the CIA. So that is, the evidence is already there. Obviously, the evidence can continue, but it is our responsibility, if we want to make evidence-based policy making, to refer to the evidence basis, which is the CIA, which is before us today. Some of these extra points about licence monitoring, of course, that data can be and will be monitored anyway. The officers do monitor the number of licenses that are coming in, but the evidence on crime and disorder, which is the decision before us today, is in the CIA, and that is before us. And then at the next in the next term, when the next version of any special saturation policy comes in, a fresh CIA would be then commissioned. But we have before us the evidence which the officers find sufficiently enough to put forward a recommendation that we adopt this. Thank you. Councillor Roman.
Okay, I'll try to keep it short. Thank you. We've heard lots of discussions on both sides, and we had that last time as well. Nothing really is clear cut that if we have no SSP, there's going to be loads of new applications. The business is going to be booming. There's going to be nightclubs. more bars, nothing of that sort we've seen. And it's quite tentative which side of the argument you are. People agree on some things from one side or the other side. So I'm just going to refer back to the policy objectives. And for me, the public, the residents are more important above everybody else. So 52 applications, 51 were granted with the SSP in place. If it's just, even if you think of it, the people that are thinking not to have an SSP, even if you think about it as an extra blanket to protect the safety of users, the people that go to these clubs, we've just had Freshers Week, so you can imagine what Cowley Road's like at the moment. The residents that live around all these establishments, Crown Street, and you have all these places in the city centre. So it's not been clear cut for me to somebody to say that there should not be an SSP. So in that, I'll use a bad word, to be conservative, it's better to have a safety net and have the SSP, because nobody has said that having a SSP or not having an SSP has made any difference to any applications. So for safety of our residents and for the policy objectives, I think to have it in place is much better.
And just to clarify, in the interest of time, because I think we have to move to a decision now, are you moving a motion then to support this? Is that or
Yes, I am.
yeah, okay. So do I have a seconder? Okay, Councillor Mundy, yeah, thank you. So before us, we have the motion that we agree as a committee the cumulative impact assessment, including the recommendation for the cumulative impact to be retaining a special saturation policy covering the city centre and East Oxford areas. So can I see a vote of hands, all of those who agree with this motion to retain essentially the special saturation policy? Show of hands, please. Okay. And can we have a show of hands, all of those who are against the motion? Okay, so that has fallen. Yeah. Okay, so we need now to come up with a recommendation to full council. Just clarify this with the lawyer, so just our legal advice. So just to note, so because we have to now put this to full council, but what we are saying to full council is that we note that the cumulative impact assessment for 2025 to 28, but we do not. Yeah. Jonathan might, yeah, Jonathan might be better advised to on the exact wording. Jonathan, please, can you clarify?
So I have not seen which way the vote went because I'm watching the live stream. So could you just, Hannah, could you just clarify what the vote was, just so I know?
So it's fallen. So it was 5 agreed, 6 disagreed.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so the SSP, I believe, has expired. So you would be. Can you just give me a couple of minutes to just message Joshua? And then I'll be able to advise appropriately.
Yeah, so yeah.
Message away, mate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I think
Sorry,
you can.
What was the question for me?
You can ask.
No, just you can ask the question.
So I just want to double check if the SSP has actually expired. So at the moment, the council is not operating under an SSP. Am I right?
That's correct. The decision to not take the recommendation is you're putting to the council not to adopt the CIA and SSP is essentially what the decision would be.
Yeah.
Because there is no SSP in place as it stands.
Okay. So you could take that to, if the committee agreed, you could take that to full council that there would be no SSP or anything else as the outcome of this meeting, if that is what the committee wants to recommend to full council.
Do you have a clarification?
At the last one, we had to make an official proposal to not recommend the resolution and to not go forward with the SSP. So I was assuming we'd have to do the same this time. And if that's the case, I'd be happy to propose that.
It's a different process, as I understood it from.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
That's not stopping question.
yeah, we're just clarifying the wording.
So to clarify in the room, I'm with you, Jonathan, that the committee should now, the chair can ask for a proposal and a seconder for a counter recommendation, which would be not to agree that the cumulative impact assessment for 25-28, including the including the recommendation to control the cumulative impacts by retaining a special saturation policy covering the city centre and East Oxford areas is not agreed on. Yes, and then point 3 would be to recommend to full council that such cumulative impact assessment and special saturation policy is not adopted. Can you clarify that you agree with that, Jonathan?
Yes, that would be fine.
Does anyone propose that wording,
Point of
please?
order. Do we have to make any recommendation at all?
Yeah, Jonathan, can you just clarify that? But our understanding is yes, constitutionally we do. Yes.
So thank you, Chair. So the committee has voted down what is on the report to say that they do not want to recommend to full council the SSP. So at the moment you need to take a decision. Last time it was brought to committee, you decided that it should be brought back to committee pending further investigation. So what you could recommend to council, which is what Ali has said, that the committee does not want to proceed with an SSP. That is my understanding of it. But obviously, if we've got any of that wrong, Ali, Hannah, please jump in.
Sorry, my understanding is that the final decision rests with full council. And so we cannot decide here that we cannot end it here, which might be something that people, it must still go to full council. So because of the vote that has just happened, as a committee, we have agreed to say no to the SSP. We have to put that proposal now to full council, but full council will make the final decision on this, not here.
Yeah. Thank you. And Councillor Lygo.
Sorry, so for clarity, that we are making a proposal for council to make a decision, and are we allowed to add to the recommendation, for example, that this be reviewed should we not decide on the vote of full council to go ahead with the SSP?
I think that yes, you can, if there's a proposal that is seconded, that it goes to the recommendation to full council is that it is not adopted. If that passes, then it would go to full council for to see whether they agree with your recommendation to not adopt it. If that is voted against here, there could be another proposal and second for it to come back before this council, the next meeting or the one after, for a further decision making on whether or not so that it would be down to the officers to put another report in. But you could ask that. But the point that you made, Chair, to the meeting is that the evidence won't change.
Yeah, thank you. So again, reminding our statutory duty, which is to make evidence-based policy making on the 4 licensing objectives, prevention of crime and disorder, of which we've got an evidence base of crime statistics. We've decided to reject, on the basis of this vote, the crime statistics. We've rejected the evidence. Let me just be clear here. So that has been rejected. But what we have then, we've now got to do, because we ultimately are a recommending body to the full council, we now have to say, and so if one of those who chose to reject this would like to come up with the wording, that then we are recommending to full council that they do not proceed with a special saturation policy based on the CIA. That is what we need someone to do. That will then, in terms of procedure, go to full council for a vote. But I need one of you, on the basis of those who have just, because we've just voted down the keeping it, can someone put forward a statement saying that they...
Okay, so we recommend to the city, for the full council, that they do not accept the SSP as proposed in this meeting.
And we have to state why, on the basis of why. Is that clear? Do we have to say why?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Okay.
But that's as proposed in this report, yeah?
And based on the CIA. Yeah. Okay.
Well, we note the CIA, but what our recommendation is that
Yeah,
they
but
do
it's
not.
based on the CIA. So on the, Mhm.
Just in regard to.
I don't agree with that stuff. Sorry, Becky.
There we go. Just in regards to reasons, I think you have alluded to reasons, and if you're making the decision, because a licensing officer would prefer there to be some reason. From what my understanding is if you are, because the data and the evidence isn't really what
I'm
you're
not
debating.
convinced by the evidence, I'd say.
But what you're saying is you don't want to adopt the SSP, and if you're doing that because you feel the licensing objectives can be upheld sufficiently without it,
Yeah.
then that may be your reason why. If someone would like to propose something like that.
Just to clarify, so we've got this this half-written recommendation to council that that is being put forward on the basis of Officer Advice. Councillor Ottino, would you like to elaborate?
Okay, so we
on
note
the
the
statement?
cumulative impact, what's it called? Assessment. And we don't think this or any other evidence provided is sufficient to bring in saturation policy, and that we think that the existing policies that we have and laws that we have are sufficient enough for us to uphold the licensing objectives. And it's a saturation policy as proposed in this, because that's a specific area, isn't it, document? We weren't able to.
Just on that point, so we've got Councillor Ottino that's put forward this motion. We will need a seconder on the wording, because the clarification of the as proposed, it's proposed on the basis of the evidence. That's what the CIA informs the boundaries of then what is put forward in the special saturation policy.
Previously
So
we
that-
talked about trying to amend it, and obviously we aren't able to do that. Yeah. The area.
So do we have a seconder for Councillor Ottino's? Councillor Taylor's second, thank you very much. So can we have a vote on this recommendation, please? So all of those in favour of this recommendation to full council, please raise your hand. The recommendation is that we do not accept the special saturation policy as proposed because we do not think it is sufficient and the licensing objectives can be upheld sufficiently without it. So all those in favour of that recommendation, please.
Sarah, I don't know where you got the because we do not think it's sufficient bit from.
This is what Councillor Ottino has just elaborated.
I didn't hear him say because it is not sufficient.
I think it's the evidence.
Because the evidence.
Yes.
Because we do not think the evidence is sufficient to bring in the policy as proposed. And the licensing objectives can be upheld sufficiently without it. So
we're not convinced by it.
we are not convinced by the evidence. Okay, let me just write this down so that we're all clear on the exact wording of this. So, and for those of you in the back of the room, we will very shortly be moving to your agenda item. So please do hang on there. You can take a toilet break if you need it. We won't start without you. So we do not accept the special saturation policy as proposed.
Is required, maybe as
proposed, he said as proposed, based as we are not convinced the evidence is sufficient to bring is sufficient to require SSP, and the licensing objectives can be upheld held sufficiently without it. Is that
Without a situation.
without a SSP? So I'm going to read this out again. Order, order. Okay. No offensive weapons of mini whips going. Yeah. Okay. So so the wording is: we do not accept the SSP as proposed. We are not convinced the evidence is sufficient to require an SSP, and the licensing objectives can be upheld sufficiently without an SSP. Okay, so that is what it's been put forward. And then we had, who did we have that was going to support that? Councillor Taylor. So it was put forward, seconded. So put forward by Councillor Ottino, seconded by Councillor Taylor. So can we have a vote on those who support this statement that they do not accept the SSP? All of those in favour of that statement? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, all of those who are against this statement? Thank you. So that statement will go as a recommendation to full council, and I think that then closes the matter. Thank you very much. Just again, a reminder of our licensing objectives, and that the policy point that around the nighttime economy has been noted, but we need to put that to other business of the council, and it has no place within this decision-making body. Okay, so the final agenda item then for this is to note our future meeting, which is on the 9th of February 2026 at 6 o'clock. So look forward to seeing you then. But in the meantime, we have our full council. So thank you very much. Okay, I think we have 2-minute break. And now, gentlemen at the back, if you've got any colleagues that you would like to remind to come back in, we're going to move on to your agenda item now, and I'll pass over to my colleague.
We're going to take a 2-minute comfort break, and then we'll start the next meeting.
Okay. Do you have, it's really badly, sorry, when I start getting nervous.
It's all right, I have it. I was trying, no, it's all right.
I apparently have really neat handwriting
No,
sometimes.
but I read what you're writing, I was copying out what you're writing, so
I always think you're recording anyway, so you can read it. I try and articulate it verbally, so just going over, you know.
it was good, thank you. No, I have got it.
It's evidence-based policy making, reject the evidence. No, I'm sorry, there's a mother and baby unit, and all my, I mean, Jazz, you live, right. Like, people, I think would you like to do a press release about this? Press release.
I think we need to write a press release.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean.
It's shocking.
The mother and babies, these are mothers who live on my street with babies. I mean, there are already issues with their partners they've been removed from, who are hanging out outside, and the police keep on having to remove. We've got the people who have got Parkinson's and their wheelchairs can't go out. There are these, you know, women who are not able to go out at night just to pop to Tesco's.
parties.
From councillors, I understand we've got apologies from Councillor Rule and Councillor Clarkson and also Sanderson. Is that right? Okay, those are any other apologies? No, just those three. Okay, now I'm going to move on to councillors to say now is the time for any declarations of interest. So if any committee member has had any communications or meetings with relevant persons to do with items on the agenda, now is the time to declare those. Does anyone have any declaration of interest? Councillor Raymond? Yes.
Chair, I've spoken to members of Coulter, but I come to the meeting with an open mind.
Okay. So can we minute that? You've had discussions with Coulter and you come to the, can you just say that again for the minutes?
What they've written in the report, they discussed it with me. I didn't offer any of my interpretations on it, if you like, and I come here with an open mind.
Okay, yes, councillor Chuck.
Coulter organised a meeting with me, but on the day of, they cancelled it. So I have had communications with them, but I haven't actually formally met with them or spoken to them about this policy. But I do think it warrants a mention.
Okay, and I think also for the record, are you coming to the meeting with a fair and
And I'm
open
coming to
mind?
the meeting with an open and fair mind, yes.
Okay, thank you for those declarations of interest. Is there anyone else who would like to make a declaration of interest, having had any communications? Yes, councillor.
Just in case, I mean, at times over the years, I think we've all probably had emails from Coulter about things, but I haven't been engaging in a dialogue about it or expressing opinions. So
Okay.
I'm very much coming with an open mind.
With a fair and open
With a
mind.
fair and open mind, yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. Anyone else? I'm just giving councillors a moment to reflect. Councillor Mundy.
I've only said, I've not had a meeting since last time I raised the fact that I'd met with members of COA. I will just say
Right.
that. So I've already raised that, so I'm not going to raise that again. And I come into the meeting with a free and open mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillor Mundy. Councillor Miles.
In the interest of transparency, at the Oxford City Council Christmas drinks, I did chat with Representative Coulter, but not about this policy. It was merely just a general, everyone was having a hello rather than, and I come to this meeting with an fair and open mind. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's everyone. I think that's been sufficient time. Great. Okay, thank you. So next is the minutes of the previous meeting. So has anyone, I'm going to move that we approve the minutes of the meeting on the 21st of May. Does anyone have any comments about the minutes? Anything that they'd like to note? No? Okay, in that case, I propose that we approve the minutes of the meeting on the 21st of May as a true and accurate record. I'll propose that. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, councillor Raymond. So can we all vote for that? Do we approve the minutes? Yes, that's carried. Thank you. Great. Okay, the next item on the agenda is addresses by members of the public. And we've had 2 addresses have been submitted. Thank you very much, Jonathan Payne and Bashir Ahmed. That's... Sorry? Can I go first? Yes, if that's yes. Okay, just to remind you that you have 5 minutes, you'll get 5 minutes and the other speaker will get 5 minutes. And because we are short of time and we do intend to stop by 9 o'clock, I'm going to hold you to your 5 minutes, which one of our officers will time. Okay, thank you. Off you go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Bashir Ahmed, the chairman of Coulter. On the 10th of January 2019, the Oxford Hackney Carriage Trade was presented with proposals to change from the diesel taxis to the new electric taxis. At the time, 6 years seemed a reasonable time for the transition. But unfortunately, then came the COVID-19. The taxi trade lost 4 years of work because of the coronavirus. Along with that came the new trend of people working from home. This trend has continued as people are still working from home, and we have lost a lot of work, in fact, all the work. People no longer travel to work in the morning, so cabs are parked up in the morning, middle of the day, and in the evening as they're not coming back. Botley Road, to make matters worse, the closure of Botley Road, we have lost all our work to Botley and beyond. There is no guarantee when the Botley Road will reopen. As if this wasn't bad enough, last summer, the summer of 2024, the nightclubs in Oxford permanently shut their doors and closed down. There are no night travelers during the week, nor the weekends. The city centre has become a ghost town at night, apart from the cabs parked up on the ranks. Uber, with the licensing of Uber in Oxford in December 2024, this is last December, we have witnessed private hire drivers from other areas coming and operating in Oxford, such as cities like Southampton and Portsmouth. We have complained. Uber is a 53 billion pounds of international company. Uber subsidizes their fares during their promotion periods, which no one, and I say no one, can match. But once established, they have peak and out of hours rip-off crazy fares. For example, from St. Clement to city centre, while we charge £6 or £6.50, they charge £21, and you have no control over that. But you have control over our fares. Rail station to Kassam Stadium open on the opening day of the football season this year. Our fares are £12.50, £13 the most. They're charging £38. Now, moving on to the electric taxi prices, the price of the new London style wheelchair accessible taxi has gone up again from £75,000 to £82,000. This is if you buy cash, but on interest, it is £102,000. It's a lot of money if you haven't got the money, buy cash. The proprietors in Oxford, who changed most of them to electric, but not all of them, at the time took advantage of the £7,000 government grant, £5,000 council grant, plus 3 years of taxi license fee relief, and also the cheaper electricity at the time. Well, the electric has now gone up from 18 pence to 74 pence per kilowatts, and the grants are no longer available. We have demonstrated as a trade our intention that we want to work with the City Council, and therefore 40% of our proprietors have already changed over to the electric taxis. Concerns about the pollution. Any concerns about the pollution in the city is more than mitigated in the context of introduction of 159 electric buses on the city bus routes in 2024, that's last year, as well as 40 new London-style wheelchair accessible electric taxis. We are doing our bit for the environment. It's not that we don't care, we do. We care about the health of the people of Oxford, but it's a huge amount of money to buy a brand new cab. Other cities we've looked at have given longer time. For example, Coventry has till 2030. South Cambridgeshire has 2030. Rochdale 2030. Manchester 2030. Reading 2028. But having spoken to their chairman this afternoon, they have informed me that those proprietors who have TX4 Euro 6 engines, there is ongoing negotiation for them for 2032. We are thankful to the City Council, but the taxi trade is under
Just to
heap
let
of
you know,
pressure.
you've got 30 seconds left.
Is under heap of pressure and would like to request additional time for the smooth transition, given all the difficulties and circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being so timely. Much appreciated. Okay, so next public speaker. Thank you.
Chair, I'm grateful, and good evening to councillors. I'm conscious I've been in front of some of you on a few occasions, and my mind is carried back to the underground bar that you were discussing earlier, where I represented the applicant on that. I raised that not because I represented them, but because this issue of taxi licensing and emission standards and the economy of the town centre is actually intrinsically linked, that the two things go hand in hand. With a dead town centre, there is a dead taxi trade. With a dead taxi trade, there is a dead town centre. So I mention it in that context. You have the submissions from me, the bullet points that I've made, and the 3 points that I really want to drive home are the ones at the beginning, that your consideration of this matter must take into account only those matters that are relevant to this particular issue. That the objective, and the objective here, of course, is the reduction of the emissions within the city centre, that it is sufficiently important to impose the requirement for electrification of the vehicles. And then thirdly, that making sure that the decision that you make this evening, whether to continue with the implementation or to pause it, is the least intrusive. And as a lawyer, I couldn't get away this evening without giving you some quote from the case law, which is the East Side Cheese case. And that is a piece of European decision making, which basically says that an authority should look at the measures and the options available and choose the least onerous to achieve the objective. Well, the objective here is a reduction in emissions within the city centre. And this brings me to the first of the other bullet points that I make, and that is that the emissions already contributed by the taxi trade within the centre of the city are minuscule when compared to the other emissions that occur. I'm aided very much by the report on page 80, and that, to my argument, is worth its weight in gold. You will see the figures in that report on page 81 about the small effect. So what the council should be doing here is not looking, in my submission, at the small effect, but trying to achieve a bigger effect. And that, of course, has been addressed through the ZEZ and the proposals for a ZEZ, and where we go with that, we wait and see, of course. But actually, it suggests, applying the East Side Cheese case, that actually the council should be looking for the big wins, not the small wins. Now, there is an advantage, of course, for the taxi trade to have electric vehicles within the city centre, but that is not the miniature, the minute, the minimum impact result that is looked for here. What is appropriate is to look at other options, ZEZ, look at where the siting of taxi ranks are, all those sorts of things. And also, I'm afraid that there is a role for the county to have here in terms of its transport strategy, which at the moment I think has 2 references to taxis, and none of them are particularly relevant to emissions. That's, to my view, an omission of the county council which needs to be addressed. The report itself highlights one of the suggestions, and that is to align the implementation. And you've heard from my colleague on my right that there is a wish to support the council's initiative for zero emission, but to align that adoption with the Oxfordshire reorganisation, if I can call it that, which is in the offing. Now, we know at the moment that there is a provision for final submissions next month. A decision will be made in 2026. There will be elections. I'm sure that everybody is looking forward to that in 2027, with an implementation in 2028. Now, it makes sense in my submission to align with that process.
There's 30 seconds left.
Of course, because who knows what's going to happen in the future. What you do not want to do is waste time and money, and you do not want to waste the time and money of those running cabs for a decision which might be reversed in 2028, especially when the other local authorities around and about have different standards at the moment. So the proposal before you, I've set it out in the bullet points, I'm happy to take questions, are that the emission standard is delayed until local government reorganisation in 2028. I hope that assists.
Thank you very much. We won't be putting questions to the panel. We're going to move on now to ask the officers to introduce their report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll also start just to point out that any reference I make to page numbers is referring to the final published agenda page numbers, with the report starting at page 11. The purpose of this report is to consider a request to delay the final phase of the emission standards for Hackney carriage vehicles. The final phase is the requirement for all Hackney carriage vehicles to meet the ultra low emission vehicle standard. The emission standards were approved by this committee in 2019, and last year this committee considered a similar request to delay the final phase, ultimately deciding to delay for 12 months, requiring all Hackney carriage vehicles to meet the ultra low emission standards from January 2026. The current 3 phases can be found on page 12, paragraph 5. Currently, 40 of the 107 licensed Hackney carriage vehicles have transitioned to meet the ultra low emission standard. And 3 of the 4 temporary vehicle licenses are also meeting that standard currently. This report does contain the request to delay the reasons, to delay, and the reasons for that request from the City of Oxford Licensed Taxi Cab Association, COLTA, on page 13, paragraph 7, and their full details and full request can be found at Appendix 3 on pages 85 to 89. This request was also expanded upon during the public address just now. The Environmental Sustainability team have produced an affordability and emissions report to support your decision this evening. That's found as Appendix 4 on pages 91 to 96. A short policy comparison regarding ultra-low emission requirements between the Oxfordshire licensing authorities has been provided on page 14, paragraph 9. That demonstrates how the City Council's low emission goals for hackney carriage vehicles are the most immediate. And during the public address, it was just explained that it also reaches more nationally to other cities, that the goals of Oxford City are higher than the rest of the country on average. A forecast of hackney carriage vehicle licence numbers following any of the 3 proposed unitary councils following local government reorganisation can be found on page 14 at paragraphs 10 and 11. And that demonstrates that depending on which unitary model is adopted, based on those proposed currently, the number of hackney carriage vehicles will, as a minimum, double and possibly increase to over 1,000 vehicles if the single Oxfordshire proposal is approved. The majority of those inherited licences will not meet the city's ultra-low emission standards. COLTA have cited financial hardship, changes to the market, the challenges with the local infrastructure, and general uncertainty with future regulation. The Environmental Sustainability team have shown that there has been significant progress with reducing emissions in Oxford, and did highlight the increasing financial pressures on vehicle owners. And local government reorganisation does add complexity and require additional consideration, as regardless of which model is adopted, there will be significant policy alignment required in the lead up to 2028, or if that date even blows out, when that local government reorganisation takes place, there will be significant policy alignment taking place. And a review of this policy will undoubtedly form a large part of that policy alignment, because it does differ significantly local authority to local authority. We have presented 3 options for consideration this evening, but aren't recommending any one of them to you. We would like you to consider the evidence and make a decision. Those 3 options presented by ourselves are A, to maintain the current policy, which would require adoption of ultra-low emission vehicles January 2026, to extend the deadline by 1 year, so similar to what happened last year, but pushing it to 2027, or the third option, to align with local government reorganisation. The current proposed date for that is 2028, so in essence could appear like a 2-year extension, but I think wording it as a local government reorganisation, that date may push. It may very unlikely come closer. But those are the 3 options presented this evening from ourselves. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joshua. Right, has anyone, any of the councillors have questions for our officers? Councillor Attino.
Yes. Are there examples where councils have come together elsewhere where there have been differences in standards of taxi licensing, and how was that managed, I suppose? And also, obviously, it's great to see that this council's got greater environmental ambition than some of the councils around us, led by other parties. It's very disappointing we're in this position because of them. What other differences are there between our hackney carriage licenses in Oxford? We insist on disabled access, don't we? Do those other councils insist on that? Are these Hackney carriage drivers going to be swamped by vehicles that are essentially just normal cars, probably cheaper to buy and run, that don't have disabled access? How are we going to manage those other differences? Thank you.
In order, are there examples where councils have formed unitary councils? Yes. Have they included from whichever system their constitutions have set out for adoption of essentially new policies? Think of it as there will be a blank slate, and in best practice, the best bits of everything should form one cohesive policy that's then adopted in the new unitary area. The question as to how it's done varies. Where you're going, the current proposal for us will be there will be a shadow administration formed, and it will be their role during that period to bring in that policy alignment, to go through committees, to get agreement, to do, I imagine, an abundance of public consultation and consultation with licensed trades to agree what the new policy would look like. And there are examples of where this has been done. There are examples where licensing policies have not been aligned at all. And through that process, they come to an agreement. So think of it as a bit of a blank slate and a new policy being written, but we have good examples from all authorities to hopefully use. Differences between vehicles across Oxfordshire vary significantly. You raised the biggest difference from Oxford City to the others, and that would be the disabled access, because all of our Hackney carriages need to be wheelchair accessible. I would say the other significant difference is our vehicles must be purpose built, which is why you see the traditional black cabs as the majority. There are some other Mercedes Vito maybe or there's one that isn't a black cab, but essentially must be purpose built, must be wheelchair accessible. That is quite unique to Oxford City when comparing to the other Oxfordshire authorities. And then you can drill down into the depths of all of the policies as deep as they go. And the further you drill, the more differences you'll find. Some minute, some significant, and you'll find some that we do already align on. But the answer is, how do you do it? Very difficult with time and hopefully with experienced officers and politicians helping us along the way. Does that answer your question? I'm happy for a follow-up.
I'll just come back. Are there examples, for instance, such as, were we to continue with what we were planning to do? Are there examples where, for instance, a bigger authority, such as maybe Oxfordshire, would license taxis, Hackney carriages in Oxford differently from other parts of their area? Are there examples of authorities that license differently depending on where those drivers operate?
As in one unitary authority having multiple different policies for different regions within their district? There are examples like that. Bath and North East Somerset is an example I can think of, which is one authority controlling that have two regions and two slightly different taxi policies. This is something that would probably need legal advice, legal counsel. As far as I understand, that method of splitting within an authority that is used at Bath and North East Somerset is a historical, it's something that's historical. And I think the legal authority to do that is no longer used, or if you have it, you can keep it. If you've taken it away and don't have it, you can't introduce it, is my understanding. But the many years of case law and the age of law that is relevant to this type of licensing, that would need significant external counsel, internal counsel about if it can be done or not. I don't know of any authorities that have formed a unitary and then created smaller authorities within. They may exist, but we haven't got to the stage of forming the shadow authority to start exploring what options are there. Right now, we're trying to manage the policies we have today.
Thank you. Any further questions? We're still at the questions for officers stage. Yes. Oh, sorry. I think Councillor Miles was first and then Councillor Raymond.
Yeah, it was just a clarification. You noted that there were tougher standards on the city Hackney carriage trade in terms of disability, for instance, and therefore that led to some of the, different types of vehicles. Is that by virtue of this being an urban area compared to the other districts being rural areas? What's the root cause of the reason for those differences as they've evolved?
The reason for different policies, authority to authority, because the authority to license is devolved amongst many authorities for many years, and you have different councillors and different local area needs. The people of Oxford who you represent may have different needs or different ways to protect them, to protect the public in the city may well be different to a rural area, which could form it. It may just be different licensing functions have led to slightly different policies. There is a lot of national guidance. There is legislation that everything must come from. That legislation is much older than a lot that we are used to using. And there is more now over the past few years of statutory guidance as well to assist that. But I think the road in the licensing world has been that standards have been coming up. And generally what we found in Oxford City is standards have come up to meet where we are. We have had to make very little change to our policies to meet national standards, where some authorities have had to come quite a long way to meet those. So it's just different authorities. And obviously I can't speak to another authority's decision to do one thing where we do another.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up? No, I've got yours. Councillor Raymond first.
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of things that noted that the next CIA is proposed in 2028. I know that you said that you could make a decision, you're not recommending anything. So by having another cumulative impact assessment in 2028, what's the reason for saying that you're going to have one in 2028?
Yes, sorry, Councillor Raymond, was that the last?
Oh, was it?
Cumulative impact assessment? I think
No,
that was.
I thought it was on this one, sorry. All right, but anyway, that's not an important question. The other important question was, since this policy was introduced, the council, we promised so many things. There'd be additional electric charges around the city centre, around people where the taxi drivers could actually be able to charge their cabs, because not all cab proprietors will have houses or will be able to charge their cabs. I haven't seen any apart from the one on Cowley Road, and I think that we had one on Parks Road or Crick Road around that area. I've been led to believe that we should have had some in St Giles by now, so that they're coming, but they are coming, but they're taking a bit of time to come. And the other thing about the assessment, which is on this assessment definitely, I get the fact that by delaying or by a year or longer, that there's going to be a benefit to the people that have the cabs, because they're going to have a bit of, the only benefit they can have, they're not going to be stressing now, so they have some financial leeway there. But it said the other part was the extension may result in financial disadvantage for the people that have got the cabs. I failed to understand what disadvantage they've got, because if we look at the report of the finances, that report's actually suggesting that having an electric cab now is actually financially beneficial. So at one point was suggesting that it's beneficial to have an electric cab, and at the other point was suggesting, I can't see the disadvantage to the 40 that brought it. I would have thought that they would have been better off. They're certainly better off than the ones who've got them, because they can afford an expensive cab.
Thank you. So the 2 points were one on the charging points and the availability of those, and the second one was about are the people who've already invested in a ULEV cab going to be at a financial disadvantage? Please explain.
I can try. Thank you. In terms of things said at, say, 2019, when policy was first adopted, you as a committee or your counterparts then, I assume, considered things like that in making a decision. My advice would be, look at what we have, look at still what's being proposed and what's being promised now, where we are now, and make a decision today based on what you feel is right. I would say that the environmental sustainability team are working constantly to introduce better, to introduce more charging points. I know that they did a lot of work trying to keep the tariffs low for charging as well, and are in constant communication. I think they speak a lot with representatives like Coulter, trying to work out the best ways forward, and there have been more charging points and so forth introduced. But like I said, whether that's what was expected, whether that's to this level that the trade expected, I can't speak to that. So I think you should consider where we are now and where it may be going in the future for your decision. As for the disadvantage to the 40 that have already invested, that statement came from the Equality Impact Assessment, and I'll be explicitly clear that that statement is that there may be a disadvantage to those that have already invested. I cannot speak to that disadvantage. But there is, if the return on investment may not have been met yet by some of those that invested, we can't say for sure unless those 40 that invested come forward and provide us and say, have they or have they not had a return on investment yet? If they had waited longer, maybe they would have been able to use a worse emitting vehicle for longer, and that may have financially benefited them up until this point. I would say that comment is simply, it also may not. Those 40 may not be disadvantaged, but for the Equality Impact Assessment, it has to at least be addressed that there are some that have invested, there are some that have not. Extending this so they don't have to adopt right now would theoretically financially benefit those right now, and those that did invest earlier thinking they would be forced to later, they may be at a disadvantage now. Again, though, I can't speak to the individuals.
Okay. Oh, one follow-up, go on.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. So my point about the charges and the infrastructure was that because of when that was done in 2019, and I wasn't here in 2019, things were a lot different. It was pre-COVID, so the councillors would have thought that we would have been more progressive with the charges and the facilities, but things have got delayed. So hence, if our side of the bargain has been delayed, then it's only fair to consider somebody else's delay as well. That was the point I was trying to make. So I just want to know, and if you can't clarify, just say that, you know, members, what they decided in 2019, has the council fulfilled all of their promises, obligations, or suggestions to the trade by 2026, or when we ask them at the moment to change their cabs? Could you, yes or no would do?
Really, I am limited to what is in the previous licensing report and then the subsequent decision. What I would say is there was the licensing report. I think there were many verbal representations that came to that 2019 as well. The implementation of the policy did not formally agree any introductions or any promises. Some authorities have done that, where they say we will introduce this, however, first we will do this infrastructure change and then do it. What I can say is in 2019, there was no such agreement. However, things said from other departments or environmental sustainability or other councillors, you're right, there may have been a view that we may be in a different place. I can't speak to whether or not we are where they thought they would be. But again, I'd say look at where we are, look at the progression we have made and the progression that we plan on making going forward. You as councillors probably have a better idea about where that is heading, because it's not through licensing. It's not the licensing team that introduced new charges. It's the environmental sustainability team. It's grants that might come in. It's other departments that actually fulfill these. So licensing ourselves, I guess, I don't like saying it, but licensing didn't make any promises. I understand the council may have alluded that we'd be in a better place. And I do think you should absolutely consider where the city is now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Upton, you were next.
Thank you. Yes, so this is all about weighing up, you know, what's fair for the taxes versus what's fair for the city in terms of our air quality, etc. And yes, we do have some policy levers, and this emission standard is one of those. So we delayed it by a year last year because, as we've had outlined, times are hard. And now we have had Uber arrive. So Uber have come to the city. Now I understand clearly this was not actually anything that the city had any control over. I'll just ask Josh to confirm that. That I mean, if they satisfied the licensing conditions, we had to give them a license. It wasn't like they applied and we had a choice to say yes or no. It's just if they tick all the boxes, then we have to let them. But they're here. So what I'm just wondering is how much of a deal this is for how much of a problem this is for our Hackney carriages. So what I'm wondering is, can the hackneys from outside of our area come into the city using Uber in any way? Because if they could, then the advantages that our taxis have by the fact they have their disabled access, they can go through the ZEZ. Are those advantages then going to be sort of given to hackneys from outside? And just as a question, could our hackney cabs switch to using Uber to get fares? And if they did, would that fare be regulated by Uber or by our policies?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for those very controversial licensing questions for the licensing industry, which I will answer on a live stream for you. Did we have any control over Uber's application? Only as much as we have control over any application for any private hire operator. Private hire operator applies to us, they meet our criteria, they meet our conditions and requirements, and they submit that application. That application is considered as we would for any other private hire operator. And their license, and that was done, and their license was granted. They went through the same checks in person before a license was granted. We visited their office, we looked through the system that they planned on used, and that they could meet all of our conditions in regards to what's recorded, how it's proposed, how it's sent to us when requested, all of the safety requirements. And that was all done and met, and therefore their license was granted as a private hire operator. How much of a problem is this for the trade? It is a question for the trade. The trade are clearly saying that the impact of Uber on them is significantly a financial impact on the trade. Uber operating in Oxford City is obviously completely lawful. The private hire drivers that are operating through Uber are very happy doing so, particularly during the promotional periods where they can make potentially more money than a fare through a traditional operator. It's bringing it to licensing, though, with our function being public safety. The introduction of Uber thus far has not presented any issues of public safety that the licensing authority are concerned about. There has been a reduction in complaints in regards to out-of-town vehicles since the licensing of Uber, and we have seen an increase in vehicle and driver license applications to Oxford City from those that had held licenses in authorities neighbouring Oxford and were working in Oxford in out-of-town vehicles with out-of-town licenses. So the impact so far has been, and those that were working out of district are coming and getting licensed with Oxford City, are meeting the criteria, the drivers are being deemed fit and proper, where those are being deemed fit and proper, and the vehicles, and they're applying for vehicle licenses here as well and getting licensed with Oxford City. And I think the big thing for me, again, public safety is the core of what we do. And there are not many statistics I can pull in regards to the impact of Uber immediately, particularly they've only started operating since February. They got licensed in November and launched in February. So far, the only statistics I can provide you are that the number of complaints for out-of-town vehicles has been significantly reduced. The number of vehicles from out of town, as in not in Oxford City District, not licensed by Oxford City District, has reduced significantly. Those that are licensed from further afield, I would say, are more obvious. So there have been some Portsmouth, I saw a New Forest, there's been a couple of others. When that occurs, we get in contact with that local authority and try to create a quick relationship to see what they can do to stop it happening as much. So far, we've had really good responses from other authorities further afield who also don't want to see their vehicles going so far across the country to operate outside of their own district. If we see more of it, we would arrange for their licensing officers to come to the city to deal with compliance alongside us, like we're seeing in the north of Wolverhampton officers having to travel halfway across the country to do enforcement of their own vehicles, which have moved quite a lot. The final part of the question, I think, was, third part of the question is, can out-of-town Hackney carriage Ubers operate in the city? Short answer is Uber licenses private hire vehicles, not Hackney carriage vehicles. That's part of their business model currently. They did a trial in London, which I'd say, let's not look at that right now, about using Hackney carriages. But they license private hire vehicles. A private hire vehicle can operate anywhere in the country as long as the operator they booked through, the driver that that has been sent, and the vehicle are all operating under the same authority. And in an online operator's case, when you go online on your phone for an app, it may connect you to Portsmouth's Uber license, and they may send a Portsmouth Uber driver and vehicle. Historically, that would have been nearly impossible with how things work, but now that apps and the internet work so quickly, Uber are able to, their system will, in the blink of an eye, see what vehicles are where and will direct passengers to the correct operator to enable a lawful vehicle sent from anywhere in the country. I'm so sorry if that was misunderstood by anyone, but I've tried. So any out-of-town private hire vehicle seen in Oxford, I would say, is almost certainly operating perfectly lawful. My concern would be if there were compliance issues, complaints or enforcement issues, and public safety concerns in relation to those vehicles, of which so far we have not seen. If that changed, we would obviously do what we can to address those, whether that's asking officers to come to us, or if we're seeing our vehicles or drivers licensed by Uber operating further afield, we would want to do the same and ensure that we're ensuring compliance and regulation and the safety of those vehicles wherever they are in the country. Could a Hackney carriage vehicle switch and work through Uber? The problem here is the fares. A Hackney carriage fare is regulated by their local authority when the journey is within that district. So if it's Oxford City to Oxford City, they must charge the fares or less. If Uber are charging more than the Hackney carriage in that district otherwise would charge, then they can't, because they can't charge more than what their fare, the fare you have set essentially is. If they're charging less, then the Hackney carriage vehicle driver could agree to pay to charge less. We haven't seen that, I don't think, really anywhere in the country, but it theoretically could happen. It then gets a little bit more difficult.
Sorry, officers. I'm going to, given I think we've covered the Uber issue in great detail, and we are running, up against the clock. So I'm going to move on. Thank you, Councillor Mundy. You are next.
Thank you. So yeah, I actually was going to ask about Uber as well. I'm not going to mention that. So right, I wanted to talk about the cost of operations. So just looking at the costs of running these LEV-Cs versus the Euro 4, you've got the table there, and it references the fact that it's basically £2,000 a year more expensive to operate the LEV-C ETX than a diesel Euro 4. So does that include the maintenance costs? Second part of that question, please, is we had previously asked that there would be more support locally for the drivers of LEV-Cs to get their vehicles maintained here in Oxford, or at least much closer. We were getting reports that people were driving up to Coventry to get support for their warranties, and we were hoping that direct services would be able to meet that demand locally and reduce the cost to the drivers. So has that happened? And has it got any cheaper to maintain the LEV-Cs in that time period? Yeah, the other thing, so we've mentioned the Vitos, the Mercedes e-Vitos, but we haven't got a comparison of what their price is like. Are they cheaper to buy and maintain than the LEV-Cs? Are they difficult to source? Yeah, is there a way around this for people to source those rather than Lev Cs, which are still compliant, or is it not going to make a big enough difference? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, can I, Councillor Jupp, do you want to ask your questions at the same time?
I'll withdraw it.
You would, thank you.
I'll try and speed through these, mostly because I don't know your answers. Does it include maintenance? I don't know, you'd have to look through the report produced by the Environmental Sustainability team. If they say it was included, then it was. If it wasn't, I would assume not. I didn't produce that report. I just requested it be done and provided it for yourselves. So I didn't do the research myself. Maintenance locally, we promised improvement. We did. The ODS trained up more or got LEVIC qualified technicians. And I haven't had a complaint about them not having availability for maintenance of the ultra low emission vehicles. And the warranty issues, we also addressed and found that the ODS were doing warranty replacements when there was a warranty in place. The issue was in regards to extended warranties and whether those extended warranties were done properly from wherever the vehicle owner actually got that vehicle from, because that extended warranty needs to be entered on the system properly for ODS to use. But essentially, yes, it was addressed. And as far as I'm aware, that's no longer a problem. I haven't had a complaint of that for a good year and a half, I don't think. If it is still happening, I encourage the trade to let us know, and we can always contact ODS and see what we can do to make it better. Mercedes Vito's is not an ultra low emission vehicle. I think there are very few purpose-built, wheelchair accessible ultra low emission vehicles on the market. The LEVIC one is the main contender. But I think, but the Mercedes Vito isn't one of our ultra low emission vehicles, is it? No. I think there are a couple others on the market, but I don't think there's any that compete necessarily with LEVIC. Not in the UK anyway, not at the moment. Maybe that'll change.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you. This is a question to officers. So there is a reference to an attempt to deregulate the Hackney trade, which is referenced in the submission from Coulter, and it refers to a meeting where there was a report that was withdrawn that wasn't then discussed by this committee around this deregulation. I mean, clearly what I'm understanding here, we've got a limit on the number of Hackney carriages can operate. It's better for us as a city, in my opinion, to have more Hackneys than non-Hackneys because of the disabled access that they provide. But there is that cap at the moment, and that cap seemingly is being, because of the new ways of working in the other trade, then the private hires are sort of taking some of that business now. So, what was the reason for that deregulation, as it were, reference and the withdrawal of that report? And then I understand that there's going to be, or that there have been in national headlines, changes in regulations around the geographical area that Hackneys or private hires can operate. What is the time frame of that that you are aware of, if we have any knowns, and how does that link to the devolution or the local government reorganisations? And we don't need details, but just like high level. Thank you.
The Hackney Carriage Quantity Control Report is what's being referred to when deregulation is being mentioned. I would say that yes, a report was written, it was published, and it was withdrawn by the Deputy Chief Exec before it was heard. And the decision was made to do some further research and do some additional public consultation in regards to what the recommendation for that report ended up being, or what that recommendation may need to be. Obviously, since that was published and not heard, as we've spoken about today, the state of the trade has changed significantly. The state of the private hire trade as well in Oxford has shifted, and that is something that will also need to be considered in that report. I would say that that's not a report that has gone away. It is just a report that requires additional details for yourselves before the licensing team can put that report before you. Otherwise, you'll say go away and do the things that we're trying to do now. So I would expect to see some public consultation about that the end of this year, early next year, and hopefully see a report in front of you as soon as we can after that. Again, it may also be impacted by LGR and by these other things that we're talking about today. Changes to the big central government changes to the licensed trade. I would say there's been promises for change for as long as I've been a licensing officer, and nothing has come. There's lots of push for it currently. I couldn't possibly say, give a timeline on that. We get told soon a lot, and soon often doesn't come, or when it does come, it comes as guidance rather than a change in law. So I'm sorry, I can't give you more on that. And yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, and final questions from me, because I'm aware of the time, but I would like to, picking up on Councillor Raymond's point about the fairness to the 40 taxi drivers who have already invested in a ULEV compliant vehicle. I note that that the varying charges for electricity charging can be anything from 80 something pence per kilowatt down to 8p kilowatts if you're on the right tariff overnight. So there's huge range. And a lot of that seems to depend on whether you have the ability to charge your vehicle at home rather than at a public charging point. Do we have any data about how many of those 40 owners of electric cabs have the ability to charge at home?
No.
Okay, thank you. So we don't know. Okay, and a follow-up question from that, which would be, we are months away. Obviously, the extension was made. We made a decision to delay by another year. We are now in September, and this, as it stands, the new regulations are due to come in 4 months' time, and only 40 of the 107 cabs are currently compliant. So were the decision tonight to say that things stay as they are, how do you see that play? And this is a difficult question, but how do you see that playing out? That given, and I also understand, just to play into that, that I think the numbers are that by February 24, 34 cabs were ULEV compliant, and now 40 are. So there's only been 6 in the last 1.5 years. So the rate of conversion from old cab to new cab is currently very slow. So I think you'd have to therefore estimate that there's only going to be maybe 1 or 2 more cabs converted or new cabs by the time we get to January. So what will that look like if we suddenly then, if we keep where we are now, keep the policy as it is now, we would only theoretically then have 40 cabs?
Thank you for another crystal ball question for me. How it will look on the face of it is January 2026 will roll round, and from that point, any renewal application, the vehicles will have to meet the ultra low emission vehicle, which means those vehicles that renew generally in January will need to change as they submit that new application. Those that maybe have just renewed their vehicles, licenses only last 1 year for a vehicle. So those that maybe have only just renewed their vehicle would have additional time throughout the year before they need to renew and meet the next. So it would take 1 calendar year's worth of time for the rest of the vehicles to transition to ultra low emission. Whether they do or not, I guess, is the next question. It may be that some in the trade choose not to, and they choose it to be an opportunity to retire. It may be that they want to transfer their license to someone else who would then invest in the ultra low emission vehicle. It may be that they don't renew. And you're right, it may be that our number of the 107 Hackney carriage vehicles may come down. There may be, in essence, plates available for people to apply for. And the way that would work is when a license isn't renewed, there would be the usual 8-week grace period to allow a renewal to land. And after that 8-week grace period, I would say that number would probably then become available, and it would be a first in, best dressed. If someone wants to apply for a license at that point and there is a number less than 107 licensed, then we would say, thank you for your application. Doesn't meet the criteria, do the same things and issue a license to the new ultra low emission vehicle owner.
Thank you. Just one follow-up question to that. In terms of our licensing objectives, what do you think the impact of that scenario would be on the safety of the public?
I am of the opinion that the Hackney carriage vehicles in the city provide a incredibly important role in the public safety for all members or anyone in Oxford, the people of Oxford, tourists, students, absolutely everyone. Because of my double hat for the Licensing Act Authority, particularly in regards to the nighttime economy, the safety that they can provide to those travelling late at night is incredibly difficult to replace. I would say if we had a severe reduction in Hackney carriage vehicles, that wouldn't be very good for Oxford City. I think having our Hackney carriages licensed and working creates safer means of transport for Oxford City.
Thank you. Very helpful. Any more questions? Great, thank you. We're now going to move into discussion. So we have there are obviously three proposals on the table and three options that we will later choose to vote on. And there is some complication about the voting system and the process that we were going to have to check with Jonathan a bit later on. But just a note to you, Jonathan, online, we'll be coming to you shortly for some advice about the process. So the three options on the table are that we maintain the current policy, which would see that would come in within 4 months. And we've just heard from officers what we think the impact of that might be. The second is to extend the deadline by 1 year, to push it forward one year. And then it would come back, I presume, to a committee for reconsideration again. And then the last one is to align with the local government reorganisation. So I'm now going to invite some discussion. So, Councillor Atina.
I'm going to go straight in and propose that we go for option C. We align with local government review. We don't know what that is going to be, what that council is going to be. Possibly none of us will be on it. But what we do know for certain is that this trade is going to get swamped by Hackney carriage licences from elsewhere who aren't of the same standard as ours, particularly on disabled access, but for emissions. And it would be ridiculous to ask them to change their taxis now, given that the next council may not even require that. And the people they're in competition with are in much cheaper vehicles. So I think we should delay it to that authority. I suspect that authority, whoever is on it, will want to push this forward. So you all need to be aware of that, and you need to get on that train of get on that taxi of getting to electric vehicles anyway. All of us think that was a good thing, but I think it would be unfair to do anything other than
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? I think I've got Councillor Raymond and then.
Thank you, Chair. I want to second Simon's proposal, if that was a proposal. Just going back, I've had many conversations with Louise before. I think one of the reasons that a year extension was provided because of the hardship and also because Botley Road was closed. Botley Road is again closed for another year. Since that time, we've had a couple of issues. You mentioned Uber. I mean, that overriding issue that what Simon mentioned is that potentially we're going to have 1,100 cabs running around in Oxford. Leaving Oxford aside, for example, people in Kidlington, taxi drivers in Kidlington, they have a niche market, Hackney garages, they probably won't. Certainly if Oxford cab drivers are going to struggle to spend £102,000, people in outlying villages, they're certainly not. So what are we doing? So I think because of the reorganisation, it'd be crazy to do anything else, to be honest, because we don't know what's going to happen. And I don't think that the 40 electric vehicles owners have been disadvantaged. They're at an advantage. They've got it. They're happy to get it because they didn't have to get it. They got it through choice. And it's always been about the people that are struggling. So we've had 30 last time this came around, or 34. We have now 43 that temporary use. So the trade is moving in the right way. But because of the uncertainty, we might have 1,000, 1,100 cabs, people from Banbury driving in Oxford. Will they have electric cabs there? It's for somebody else to decide, I think. And it's such for the 60 cabs, 67 cabs, that equates to about £6.7 million, if my maths are good. That's probably unfair for us to impose that on people with that amount in uncertainty, really. We don't know if we're going to be here. We don't know what we're going to look like. So therefore, for these guys to spend that much money and put their livelihoods in jeopardy, I think is unfair. I think that what Josh said was quite important. I mean, some guys are nearing retirement now. Do they invest £102,000 that they'll take 5 or 6 years to pay off, and they don't know what's going to happen in 2 years? So it's unfair, I think, now. And I totally agree with Simon that I think we should just go for option 3. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
I move that we end debate and proceed directly to a vote.
Okay, so I have a proposal that we go straight to a vote, so I will take that. I'm just going to check with legal whether that is something I have to do. Whether anybody else might like to speak. Gotcha. Okay, so my legal advice is that you would have to say which one you're voting for and put that proposal, and then we will vote as to whether we want to do that and go straight to that vote.
I'm just going to clarify, Chair, if you'll allow me, that we just need a formal proposal of the option that you want to go to vote, and then that needs to be seconded.
I think Councillor Tino has proposed option 3 and Councillor Raymond has seconded option 3. And that's what I'm proposing that we move directly to a vote on.
All right, thank you. So this is not the actual vote yet. This is the proposal to go to the vote, just so that you're clear what you're voting on. So all those in favour of moving straight to a vote? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those against moving straight to a vote? 1, 2, 3. All the abstentions? 1 abstention. Okay, so that is carried. We are moving straight to a vote. Okay, so Councillor Attina, would you like to put forward your formal proposal just so that we get the exact wording?
Well, it says option C is.
So that would be that this committee has considered the recommendations and that we are voting to align with local government reorganisation. So we are not staying with the current policy. We are changing, and we are going to delay the introduction of the new standards to align with local government reorganisation. That does feel a little bit vague to me. I just want to again check with some legal, because that seems like a very vague proposal. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Exactly. Thank you. That is the wording we need. I know the wording that is on page 15 of the papers. Point 16, option C, and I'm just going to read that out for everyone in the room. So the proposal is that we align with local government reorganisation. We postpone the final phase until the establishment of the new unitary council in 2028, aligning the policy with wider structural changes and enabling consistent standards across the new licensing authority. That is the wording. Thank you. Okay. So now we need to actually. Councillor Raymond, thank you. So seconded. So now we're going to vote on that wording. So all those in favour, please vote. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry, you don't get a vote at the back, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All those against? 3 against. Okay. Thank you. I think that is concluded. So I think the final item on the agenda is to agree the dates and times of future meetings.
Also, just to confirm that we recommend to full council.
Oh, yes, sorry. Sorry, one final thing, and this is just process from our point of view. We just need somebody to propose that this recommendation will be proposed to full council. Can I have Councillor Ligo is going to propose that we propose that, and Councillor Upton as seconder, that will be sent to full council. Great, thank you.
And then vote again.
And we need to vote on that, sorry, yes. We need to vote on that. All those in favour? Thank you. 8. All those against? Thank you. Okay. I think we are finished.
Just quickly, can the minutes include a thank you to the officers for tonight, please? Hannah, thank you.
And every night, indeed. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
If anyone of them wants to become a
The date of the next meeting is the 9th of February. Okay. Call this meeting to a close. Thank you.